all the way down to the end. May those who like this post lose 10 pounds swiftly. May those who comment have their wishes come true. A gentle reminder from Luo. The story begins now. I had been devoted to Gu Shi for long years. Everyone who knew him was aware he had a deeply loyal admirer, one who would come at his beck and call. Until that day, when he looked at me, eyes red with emotion. Nian, what do you mean? What do you take me for? For what? The one last piece of emotional support after Liu Yan left? At that moment, I suddenly realized Gu Shi and would never become Liu Yan. Nian, do you really like Gu Shi that much? He's just toying with you. Can't you see that? My fingers hovered over my phone screen. Then I looked up and gave Songhan a smile. I know! I'll be off. Going to pay his bill again? How shameless! Why does he treat you like this? I waved dismissively at Songhan. I called a cab and headed to the bar where he was. Toying with me? Do you think I didn't already know that? As soon as I got out of the car, I saw that group of delinquent kids. Sister Wen! Over here! A red-haired boy jumped up and waved at me. Ignoring him, I stared straight at Gu Shi with an impassive expression. In his left arm, he held a woman. She wore a red body-hugging dress with heavy makeup, her fingers gently tracing his neck, casting me a look full of hostility. The mixed scent of perfume and smoke was suffocating. I frowned. How much for this session? 15,000. A blonde boy smirked at me. I swiftly transferred the money to Gu Shi. Our eyes met once more. Just then, the woman in his arms tightened her hold on his neck. Gu Shi looked at me with a playful gleam in his eyes, as if he were waiting to see how I'd react. This was already the 9th woman. I turned my gaze away first, a pang of bitterness hitting me. It's nothing. I'll be going, I murmured quietly. Without waiting for their response, I walked away without looking back. Faint laughter trailed behind me. I despised his dirty antics and loathed the company of his insincere friends. It made me feel sick. He wasn't worthy of being compared to Liu Yan. They were fundamentally different. The only thing they shared was a vague resemblance in appearance. Truly miss you so much. Why couldn't you just come see me? Tears began to spill from my eyes. I stubbornly wiped them away. He could never be you. I should have known. Liu Yan was my childhood friend, a fair and pure boy, radiating a gentle, youthful charm. He was handsome, with captivating, almond-shaped eyes. I was 2 years older than him. Since he was young, he'd follow me around, calling me Sister Nian. I was a withdrawn child, rarely playing with kids my age, but I was used to it. Just having Liu Yan, my little son, was enough. Even though he was younger than me, he understood more than I did. He would occasionally tell me what was right and wrong. Liu Yan always brought me joy. When we entered high school, his charm blossomed. Many girls started to like him. The girls who pursued him were relentless, and I got dragged into the mess because of it. At the time, I was in my senior year. Liu Yan would constantly come to my floor to bring me things. That persistent kid was impossible to shake off. Between classes, I'd often spot him. He'd wear the blue and white school uniform, not sloppily like others, but instead, he wore it with a youthful, vibrant energy. His handsome face, with that lazy smile, always caught people's attention. I knew he liked me. He was full of youthful confidence, his love intense and sincere. Because of this, many girls began to resent me, especially the ones in his class. They organized a group to isolate me. At first, I didn't pay much attention, until they crossed the line. They started spreading rumors and lies. It all began when I rejected a delinquent's confession, but the delinquent wouldn't leave me alone. Those idiots took advantage of the situation, saying I was fooling around with him all the time, calling me names, insulting me, saying I had no shame. Then I found dead rats in my desk, cockroaches, threatening notes, and various pranks. One day, I tracked down the mastermind. I stepped closer to her, inch by inch, until she had nowhere to back away. My eyes grew cold. Yet I kept a smile on my face. I crossed my arms, casually tipping my chin at her. A superior posture. "I know it was you," I said. "Don't mess with me. You can't handle it." She was quite the coward. She didn't say a single word the whole time, just nodded and ran off. I only smiled. Since I was young, I had learned self-defense and sander. I could be pretty intense, honestly. If I got serious, I couldn't be sure who would come out on top. But eventually, Liu Yan found out about what happened. I'd never seen him so angry. The Liu family was among the most influential in City A. He pulled some strings and immediately cut off those girls' family finances. Then he donated to buildings to the school. Every student involved was persuaded to leave. And under pressure from my parents, no other school in City A would accept them. Later, they knelt in front of my house for hours, begging me for forgiveness. I simply frowned and said, "Get lost. Such bad luck." One of them raised her head, glaring at me, and said, "Why are you so cruel? What exactly do you want?" I rested my chin, pretending to think. Then I bent down, squinting at them with a smile. "Oh, so I'm cruel, huh? Well, how about giving a few bows to this cruel person? Then maybe I'll forgive you. Evil deserves its own retribution. I had no need to be kind to them." After that, no one dared interfere with my studies at school. I took the college entrance exam. Naturally, I exceeded expectations and got into University A. And it was that winter break when Liu Yan and I officially got together. That year, Liu Yan suddenly invited me out to light lanterns one night. I rushed downstairs in my pajamas to meet him. Under the streetlight, Liu Yan was dressed in a black coat, with a red scarf wrapped around his neck. The light cast a soft glow on him, highlighting his handsome features. He looked as charming as a K-drama lead. I paused in surprise. The kid seemed to have grown up quite a bit. He noticed me and walked over with a warm smile. He wrapped the red scarf around my neck. "Wearing so little. Aren't you afraid of catching a cold? Come on, let's go light the lanterns." He held a lantern in one hand, and with the other, he grabbed mine, pulling me toward the backyard. In the yard, moonlight poured down like silver. The shadows of the moon arched like a hook, its serene glow covering the entire yard. He walked ahead, the lantern in his hand blending with the moonlight. As he lit the lantern, I watched him, a little dazed. I liked being with this kid. Being around him gave me a deep sense of peace. He had always been patient with me, always there by my side. He was my little son, brightening my entire world. "It's time to make a wish, Sister Nyan," he said, lowering his gaze to meet mine. His smile was pure and radiant. "Are you sneaking glances at me?" "Of course not," I retorted instantly, but my cheeks unknowingly flushed red. Together, Liu Yan and I clasped our hands, closed our eyes, and made our wishes. I wish for Liu Yan to have a joyful new year. I wish for Sister Nyan to stay safe and sound. We opened our eyes, sharing a smile in perfect sync. The atmosphere grew subtly intimate under the lantern light, as if the world had frozen in this moment, till he broke the silence. "Want to try it?" "Try what?" "Dating me." I was taken aback for a moment. Then, smiling, I nodded. "All right, kid." That night, I caught a cold. And every day after that, Liu Yan, that little troublemaker, came over to take care of me. "Sister Wen, why did you get sick?" He would always tease me. I'd just lie in bed, glaring at him fiercely. Those were beautiful days. That year, he was in his senior year of high school. I was a sophomore in college. He was preparing for the entrance exams. He told me he wanted to come to my university, but Liu Yan had never been a stellar student, so getting into my university would be challenging. Though with a bit of money, it was certainly doable. But that stubborn kid insisted he wanted to get in on his own merit. Determined to get into University A. Absolutely determined. I held his face and gave him a small, resigned kiss. I'll help you with tutoring. All right. His eyes sparkled with excitement. After that, whenever I had time, I'd tutor him, prepare study materials, and guide him carefully. His grades improved quickly. But getting into university, well, that would still be a stretch. Anayan, do you want the honest answer? He looked at me, his eyes full of puppy-like sorrow. I laughed, feeling helpless, and patted his head. You can do it. Believe in yourself. After that, Liu Yan became even more driven in his studies. At his current level, he just might be able to scrape by. But as the entrance exams were approaching, his family encountered some issues. Liu Yan fell ill. He fainted due to anemia. When I went to the hospital to see him, he lay on the bed, grinning foolishly at me. His face was pale, and it hurt to see him like that. I cupped his face, gently rubbing his cheeks, and told him to rest well. He took the chance to kiss me, smirking as he said, I'll definitely get into university A. There was always this youthful confidence about him, so full of passion, so easy to love. On the last day of exams, I drove him to the test center. He sat in the passenger seat sulking. What kind of guy gets driven to his exam by his girlfriend? When I finish the exams and get my license, you're not allowed to drive anymore. I held the steering wheel, smiling lightly. What are you smiling at? Did you hear me? All right. Good luck on your exams, young master. On the way, he chattered on about his plans. How he'd take me on a world tour after exams. How he'd take me to see the biggest fields of flowers and the most beautiful auroras. We arrived at the test center. As soon as I parked, Liu Yan bolted out of the car, but turned back halfway to shout, "Wait for me. I'll definitely pass." After dropping him off, I drove to the flower shop to pick up the flowers I'd ordered in advance. His favorite, Lysianthus, symbolizing a sincere and unchanging love. It was his last exam, English. Many people were gathered outside the exam hall. I joined them, waiting for him in the crowd. The sun was bright, and I felt restless. My left eyelid kept twitching. Finally, the bell rang, marking the end of his last exam. A rush of students poured out. I searched through the crowd for my boy. Here I am, not far away. That radiant boy was jumping up, waving at me through the crowd. I smiled back at him. But suddenly, my brows furrowed. My expression froze. Liu Yan, danger! Behind you! I screamed and dashed forward. Just as Liu Yan turned around, a man with a blade lunged at him, stabbing him multiple times. The crowd erupted in chaos. I pushed through desperately like a madwoman. The scene was utter chaos. By the time I reached him, that radiant boy was already gasping his last breaths. I held him, sobbing uncontrollably. There was so much blood. Weakly, he lifted his hand to wipe away my tears. Don't cry, Anayan, I'm fine. I'm not that weak. I'm dirty, don't cry. I can't remember what I felt then. My vision was blurred. I clung to him, crying so hard it tore at my heart. My clothes soaked in his blood, until the police pulled us apart. His last words to me were, Nayan, you must stay safe. Later, the police caught her. They caught Zhang Tia, the girl who killed Liu Yan. The same girl who had once spread rumors about me. Are you sad? Weren't you so tough? That girl's laughter was nearly hysterical. Didn't you tell me to get lost? Didn't you say I was bad luck? What are you pretending for now? Come on, beg me. I'll send you to join him. Ha ha ha. I went to see her. Her hands were shackled. She had requested to see me. She the one who murdered Liu Yan. She the one who destroyed my boy. Trash! What do you think you are? Filth that can't stand the light. I suppressed my inner rage and looked at her calmly. The police took her away. I could tell she truly despised me. She had originally planned to kill me. It was my fault that Liu Yan was gone. I attended his funeral. bringing with me the acceptance letter he'd longed for. I also bought a bouquet of lisianthus. Standing before him, I quietly looked at him. He lay in the coffin, still with that youthful appearance. Be happy, Liu Yan. Come visit me often. I could barely hold it together. Grief washed over me. And for days, I wept endlessly. I couldn't understand it. Why couldn't it have been me instead? Did you know? You got accepted, kid. You really did an amazing job. So impressive. You are my pride. My one true love. Liu Yan's mother came to see me. She looked exhausted and frail. Z9. Actually, he had an older brother. He was taken from us long ago. We kept it a secret from Yan, but he seemed to have always known. I looked up, my gaze unfocused. I know we were selfish, she continued. For years, we didn't have the courage to face him. Even though we found his brother a few years ago, we found him 2 years back. I was afraid he wouldn't accept us, afraid he would hate us. But Yan overheard a conversation between his father and me. He knew. He even secretly hired people to investigate it. While sorting through his belongings, we found a piece of paper. Mrs. Liu took a folded piece of paper from her bag and handed it to me. I gently opened it. The contents were simple. The tone was so familiar. It brought a bit of comfort to my heart. That kid was genuinely happy. He was thrilled to discover he had a brother. He was curious about this brother. He wanted to know what his older brother was like. He wondered what it would feel like to have a brother. If his older brother returned, he would welcome him warmly. He would make up for lost time on behalf of their parents. And finally, he'd have a brother of his own. Yes, he wanted to make up for everything his parents couldn't. At the bottom of the page, he had drawn some faces. They were quite messy. I looked at the paper and laughed softly, then asked, "What do you plan to do?" "I want to bring him back," she replied. "That's what Yan would have wanted. I support you." After that, I kept holding myself together. I controlled my emotions. But my little Yan never came to me in my dreams. By day, I lived normally. But at night, memories of Liu Yan flooded my mind. I often couldn't sleep because of it. I missed him terribly. Missed him so much it was unbearable. Every part of my life was filled with his shadow. But he was gone. I felt like my life had collapsed. I was like a walking ghost. I lived in numbness. Until I met him, Gu Shi, Liu Yan's brother. It happened while I was at the Liu house, having tea with Mrs. Liu. He appeared. Mrs. Liu had mentioned him before. They had tried to bring Gu Shi back, but Gu Shi had refused to return. He said he only wanted money. He was nothing like Liu Yan in personality. He was stubborn and reckless, with a quick temper. At that moment, he wore a baseball cap, dressed all in black, and stood about the same height as Liu Yan. When he looked up, I saw his face under the brim of his cap. His dark eyes were intense, his features exuding a sharp, cold aura, like a second Liu Yan. Especially those almond-shaped eyes identical. The only difference was, this man radiated an aura of gloom. I stared in a daze. He looked so much like him. Maybe that was when I began my entanglement with him. I started clinging to him without boundaries. He became my lifeline after losing Liu Yan. I lied to myself, convincing myself I loved him, pretending he was Liu Yan. I didn't need him to love me back. I only needed him to look like him. He was wild, surrounded by a group of untrustworthy friends. He wasn't him, but he seemed like him. I didn't know what I was waiting for, what I was chasing after. 3 years. I had seen enough of his bad behavior. Finally, I understood. The dead cannot return. He would never be him. Just a shell that looked like him. Then one day, I had a dream. I dreamt of the boy I longed for. He stood there. And he wasn't Gu Shi. He was Liu Yan. That kid who followed me around, calling me Sister Nyan. A Nyan. Why are you crying? The boy lowered his head and gently patted mine. Only then did I realize tears were streaming down uncontrollably. I miss you so much. I stepped forward, gently kissing him. I've always been by your side. Anayan, stay safe. The dream ended. I gently wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes. I felt a sense of relief. The kid had finally come to visit me. I needed to live well. That was Liu Yan's wish. I stopped looking for Gu Shi. I started living my life sincerely. After a few days of adjusting my mindset, I took over one of my parents' small companies. I wanted to give it a try, to turn that small company into a major player in City A. This was my first little goal. I thought it was something Liu Yan would want to see too. I'd always been a bit sharper than my peers, so I moved quickly in everything I did. Under my management, the company thrived. During that time, Gu Shi sent me a few messages, mainly wondering why I wasn't chasing after him anymore. I immediately blocked him. He wasn't him, so he held no meaning for me. But that day, as I left the office, I ran into Gu Shi. He was dressed in black as usual, but now he had a buzz cut, looking even less like him. He approached me step by step, his dark eyes cold and penetrating. What's your game now? What new goal do you have? You're good at playing, aren't you, Wanayan? He lifted his eyelids, a mocking smile on his lips. I looked at him calmly. You think too highly of yourself. He paused slightly, his gaze growing even colder. He didn't expect me to say that. Gu Shi, don't push your luck. So what? He looked at me, his eyes tinged with red. What do you mean, Wanayan? What do you take me for? What? A stand-in for Liu Yan? How ironic. It was my mistake before, I said. I kept bothering you and caused you trouble. I'll keep transferring you 100,000 every month as usual. Consider us even. You really think things through, Wanayan, he sneered. You think I care about your money? Good, then don't. Don't block my way. I brushed past him and got into the car. He just stood there, watching me silently. His face sullen, his gaze complicated. Where to, Miss Wen? My assistant Zijiao turned back to ask. To the Guangming Cemetery. Did you bring what I asked for? Yes, the cake and flowers are in the trunk. Ms. Wen, today is Liu Yan's birthday. I sat cross-legged before his grave, gently touching the photograph on his tombstone. The boy in the photo smiled radiantly, his smile bright and warm. I miss you, kid. Happy birthday. I bought your favorite Lisianthus. I placed the cake and the Lisianthus on either side. I spoke to Liu Yan for a long time, pouring out my troubles, sharing my joys. A soft breeze suddenly swept by, as if he were answering me. I thought to myself, it's him. I love you. By the time I was leaving, the sky had darkened. As soon as I stepped out of the car, I saw him. Gu Shi. Annoying. I pretended not to see him and walked straight towards home. Wanayan. He stepped forward, gripping my wrist tightly, blocking my path. A strong smell of smoke and alcohol wafted off him, so overpowering it made me uncomfortable. I said quietly, "Let go." No! I tried to pull free, but his grip only tightened. What do you want? I asked, frustrated. Does it have to be like this? Do you hate me? No! Tell me the truth. Why? Why? I hate that you smoke. I hate that you drink. I hate your friends. I hate this attitude of yours. Do you understand now? My emotions were slipping out of control. My eyes red as I stared at him. He released my hand, but his own eyes were gradually reddening, almost gritting his teeth. Because I'm not like him. Everything I do is different from him. That's the real reason, isn't it? I snapped back to my senses. Who said that? I've known for a long time. Since the days I returned to the Liu family, I knew. Do you think I wanted to make things difficult for you? You were the one who saw me as a substitute. So what right do you have to expect me to treat you well? What right do you have to treat me like this now? Gu Shi's voice began to crack with emotion. I watched him, lost in thought. I should have known this day would come. This is my fault. How do you want to resolve this? I want you to love me for real. Let's start over. His sudden words were like a stone shattering the calm surface of water. We both fell into a tense silence. I understand. When Nyan, you really are something. With those words, he turned away indifferently and walked off. His figure looked lonely. 2 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. Why did he have to love me? I couldn't understand. He knew what kind of person I was. Lying in bed, my mind was blank. Suddenly, my phone started ringing beside me. I reached over and saw it was an unknown number. Hello, Sister Wen? Can you come over? Brother Gu is drunk. Same place, room 301. I hesitated for a moment, then agreed. Maybe it was out of guilt. I got ready and left right away. When I arrived, I paid the bill at the front desk with practiced ease. The bar was thick with the scent of alcohol and hormones. Men and women swayed their bodies wildly on the dance floor, filling the air with shouts and an intense, seductive atmosphere. I used to enjoy coming here too. The smell of alcohol and nicotine was intoxicating. But after being with him, I'd quit. I scanned the place briefly and looked over to the corner. Gu Shi was sitting there casually, his head tilted, drunken eyes fixed on me. Let's go, I said quietly. You say go and I should just follow? Why should I listen to you? He raised an eyebrow, chuckling bitterly. You were the one who called me here. Gu Shi grabbed my wrist and, fueled by the alcohol, pulled me into his arms, his warm, alcohol-laced breath on my neck. Can you stop stringing me along? When Nyan, do you know why I like you? You went to high school. My family didn't have much money. I hung around nearby fighting for others. But I'd always catch sight of you. I really paid attention to you back then. You had this unique vibe, bold and free, like the wind. I envied that. Later, I casually asked around about you. Turns out you were quite well known, top of your grade. The school beauty of no too high. They said you were pretty aloof, and I could see that too. One time at a bar, I spotted you in the crowd. You were drunk. Fueled by my own drink, I approached you. You smiled at me. We talked about so many things. You told me you felt lonely. That's when I first liked you. After that night, you probably forgot about me. But it didn't matter. It was enough that I remembered. You probably don't recall all those random things you received in high school. All kinds of odds and ends. No need to mention it, but some of it was from me. Anyway, up until your senior year, you started being followed by someone. That person was my brother, wasn't he? I was pretty annoyed by it. I even thought about giving him a good beating, but never got the chance. Later, I overheard some people saying you were messing around, that you like to fool around with guys. Alright then. I went and beat them up. Anyone who said it where I could hear, I'd beat them. I even ended up in the station a few times because of it. Funny, right? Then you graduated, and we never spoke again. Till the Liu family came looking for me. Pretty impressive timing. Only came to find me now. Gu Shi buried his head in the crook of my neck, sneering at himself. Eventually, I also learned that I had a younger brother, but he was already gone, and they kept hiding your relationship with him from me. Just because I didn't go to school doesn't mean I'm stupid. I could figure it out easily. When you started clinging to me like crazy, I was happy. Something I'd never even thought of before. But I knew your intentions. I knew you saw me as a stand-in for him. I knew you were looking for his shadow in me. I felt helpless, so I tried to avoid you desperately, doing things that you'd find disgusting, trying to make myself different from him. I hate a lot of people. I hate my parents. I hate the Liu family. I hate that I can't belong in your world. I could have. I could have gone to school. I didn't have to end up this way. My life is a mess. But my heart isn't. Did you know that? When you deleted all my contacts, and I didn't see you for days, I wasn't afraid of anything, except of losing you. Gu Shi continued to pour his heart out to me, until he finally closed his eyes completely. I, along with another friend, helped him into the car. I took him back to my small apartment. My mind was a mess. Back in high school, I did receive a lot of things. Once I stumbled upon a few letters. They weren't love letters. Those pages were filled with snippets of warmth and sorrow from life. Whenever I was bored, I'd pull out his letters to read. His handwriting was messy, but his words were captivating. Through them, I could feel his soul, vibrant and full of life, yet deeply lonely. At the time, I was under intense pressure from my studies. In a low period, every day feeling dispirited. But those letters were like a ray of sunlight guiding me. One letter every week. I would always seek out his words to read. He never signed his name on them, even though I wanted to meet him. I never had the chance. Eventually, I began doing what he did, using paper to record my own life, all the way up to now, till today. When I finally realized that person was Gu Shi, I felt like I'd made so many mistakes. I didn't know how to face Gu Shi, or how to face Liu Yan. A heavy sadness weighed on me, looking at Gu Shi, who was now asleep on my couch, hazy and vulnerable. I froze. He must have suffered deeply. 6 years of loving me. And I only ever treated him as a dispensable stand-in. I felt disgusted with myself. Gu Shi hadn't done anything wrong. His life wasn't supposed to turn out this way. If he hadn't been abducted back then, he wouldn't have grown up in such an environment. Parents who were compulsive gamblers, a house buried in debt, no money for school, forced to do odd jobs, even getting into fights for others. He wasn't meant to live like this. He was supposed to be a child of a wealthy family. His future should have been bright. I couldn't imagine how he must have felt upon discovering he was the young master of the Liu family. It must have hurt deeply. Why did I treat him this way? I couldn't keep doing this. Clutching the hem of my shirt, I felt lost, my body trembling. Suddenly, a pair of hands gently wiped away my tears. I looked up sharply and saw Gu Shi staring at me, bewildered. Why are you crying? I quickly wiped the remaining tears from my eyes. It's nothing. Go back to sleep. Where is this? Your place. I replied softly. Yes, you were drunk. Oh, weren't you disgusted with me before? Since when did the lady change her mind? He had that same careless expression. Sleep or don't. If you're not sleeping, I'll call someone else to help. Fine, I'm already asleep. Good night. He immediately lay back on the couch and closed his eyes. I looked at him, feeling a strange calmness settle over me. The next morning, the couch was empty, but the table was filled with breakfast. My phone showed a few new messages from an unknown number. I made breakfast. Had some things to handle, so I left early. Don't forget to unblock me on WeChat. Neither of us mentioned that night again. After a simple breakfast, I headed to the office. Work had to go on. This project was critical. Right now, all I wanted was to focus on work. The day flew by. And as I was leaving, I saw that familiar figure again. What are you doing here? Why haven't you taken me off your blacklist yet? Gu Shi looked at me, clearly annoyed. Too busy. I forgot. Sorry. Don't pressure me too much. I've thought it over. You can do whatever you want. I'm not going to force you. After all, I'm just doing what I want to do. Gu Shi scratched the back of his head, turning his face slightly away. I smiled. I understood what he meant. So, what do you want to do? Do you have any dreams? To open a cake shop. I was taken aback. What? That's my dream. I'm still working on it. Gu Shi pouted. Do you need my help? No, I can handle it myself. Alright then. Good luck. I haven't been in touch with those people. I quit smoking too. Good. Keep it up. I laughed softly. Gu Shi paused, his gaze resting on my face. Alright. In the following days, I went back to work as usual. Gu Shi was nowhere to be seen, probably busy with his cake shop. It was nice. Seeing him focused and positive, it put me in a good mood too. But then, some issues arose at the company. A few employees resigned unexpectedly, including some of our most experienced team members. The atmosphere within the company started to turn tense. It was the worst possible timing for this to happen. Something felt off. I decided to speak with those who had resigned, but they were evasive, keeping silent. This wasn't right. Zijiao, get someone to look into this. Yes, Ms. Wen. My mind was filled with unease. Without those key team members, this project would be very hard to manage. Should I ask mom and dad for help? No! Absolutely not. I went to bar 301 by myself. I was feeling a bit restless. I thought a drink might clear my mind. I hadn't been seated for long when a few familiar figures walked in. My eyes widened. I was a little dazed. They were former employees of the company. And that woman, the woman who'd once kissed Gu Shi. I immediately understood. They sat at the table behind me. Their backs were to me. How's it going? Got it? We've all quit. I told you to quit. Huh, protecting your master like that? Who's looking out for you? The woman sneered. She grabbed Zhejiang by the hair, yanking her. Her mouth spewed insults, laced with mockery, laced with curses. I got up and stood in front of the woman. I smiled faintly, my eyes fixed on hers. Both of them froze for a moment. Zhejiang from our company looked at me, bewildered. I gently patted her head, shielding her behind me. I smiled and said, "It's okay, Zhejiang." Oh! Listening in on other people's conversations, are we? Ms. Wen, you really have no shame. The woman smirked, looking up at me. Who has no shame? You know the truth. Better keep your hands to yourself, I said coldly. No can do. She laughed, glancing at Zhejiang beside me. Your cute little sister is still in my grasp. Please, Li Yan, don't touch my sister. Zhejiang looked at the woman in terror. She pleaded desperately. What do you want? You know the consequences of crossing the Wen family, I said coldly. Cheap woman, you think I'm afraid? Li Jia stood up, squinting as she looked at me. But if you come with me, I might consider letting her go. If you dare call the police, then none of you will leave alive. Zhejiang, go now. I'll get your sister out. I smiled at Zhejiang, though truth be told, I wasn't certain. Then I got into the car. As soon as I sat down, I lost consciousness. Impressive. I'm done for. When I woke up, I realized I was locked in a room, like some storage closet. My phone was gone. Zhejiang should have called the police by now. I wondered if they'd let her sister go. If they haven't, things aren't looking good. My hands were tightly bound. I struggled a bit. Yeah, they tied it pretty tight. After looking around, I started rubbing the ropes against a raised nail on the table nearby. Then the door suddenly opened. You're awake, huh? Li Jia stepped into view. She kicked me hard in the stomach. I glared at her in pain. Where's Zhejiang's sister? She's gone. No use keeping her around, but she sure had a good time with a few of the guys. Li Ji laughed, covering her mouth. My lips tightened. My eyes widened. Blood roaring through my veins. Beast! I gritted my teeth. With difficulty, I spat out a few words. Don't make me angry, or you'll be next. Li Ji sneered. Aren't you just obsessed with Gu Shi? With your pathetic self, even if you were thrown at him, he'd still reject you. I lowered my head, chuckling softly. Her twisted face briefly regained composure. That's why I'll make sure dear Gu Shi sees you sleeping with another man. Let's see if he'd still want someone as filthy as you. I'd love to see that. She laughed, nearly hysterical. Miss Wen, just wait patiently. With that, Li Ji left. Utterly deranged, beyond saving. In the next 2 days, she came by regularly to mock me. Whenever I had the chance, I kept working at the ropes. Eventually, I weakened them enough that I could break free with a tug. That day, 2 large, rough men dragged me from the room. I figured Gu Shi must be on his way. So it really was an abandoned warehouse. They threw me onto a large bed in the center of the warehouse. I studied my surroundings carefully. If they attacked, I wasn't sure I'd stand a chance. Days without food or water had left me drained. Thankfully, I'd learned a bit of martial arts when I was young. I closed my eyes, formulating a plan. Enjoy yourself while you can. Gu Shi's on his way. Li Ji's voice echoed close by. Then came the clicking of her heels, and the warehouse door was shut tightly once more. I could feel the 2 men beside me getting restless. This Wen family heiress has quite the appeal. I wonder what she tastes like. Oh, old Wang, I'll go first. No way. We go together. If you finish first, what if the cops show up? I could hardly stand it. Disgusting. Brother, can you take turns? I'm not sure I can handle both of you. Please. We can go slow. Otherwise, I'll get scared. I blinked, feigning vulnerability. Fine. Old Wang, you go first. I'll take care of things myself over there. One of the men went into the adjoining room. The other climbed onto the bed, his hands pressing down on either side of me, grinning as he leaned over me. His saliva dripped onto my chest, utterly revolting. One hand gripped my waist hard, while the other tugged at my clothes. The moment my clothes began to tear, I kicked upward with all my strength, slamming my head into his face. Bitch! He groaned in pain. I tore the rope from my wrists, pinning him beneath me. I kicked his lower body with force, then grabbed a wooden stick nearby, smashing it into his groin again and again. Didn't you have a strong appetite? I dragged his head to the ground, slamming it down hard. Blood streamed down as he passed out. Then the warehouse door slowly opened. I saw that familiar face. Gu Shi. He looked at me. Alarmed, I waved at Gu Shi. With a smirk, Gu Shi rushed toward me, his mouth moving, saying something I couldn't make out. I couldn't hear him clearly. The moment his hands touched me, I collapsed to the ground. Another man had stabbed me. One knife in my body, another in my head. A searing numbness spread through me. So this is what it feels like. I didn't know what happened next. I lost consciousness. When I became aware again, I was trapped in my own body, a living shell. I could hear sounds, but I couldn't wake up. I could feel Gu Shi beside me. He was crying by my side. I wanted to tell him to stop, but I couldn't. Is this karma? It felt like I was locked in a box, unable to ever awaken. The despair was unbearable. I didn't want this. I felt a warmth in my hand. It was Gu Shi. He was holding my hand, whispering, "I'm sorry." I wanted to tell him there was no need to apologize, that I was the one who was sorry. Every night, Gu Shi came to see me. He shared bits of his life with me every day. He told me he opened a cake shop called Nyan's House. I felt happy for him. He was realizing his dream. Every day, he'd bring me a different dessert. He said he opened the shop because of me. He told me that back in high school, he often saw me gazing at a cake shop and overheard me once say, "Boys who can make desserts are the most charming." And that's how it became his dream. He told me he visited Zhejiang and her sister. Her sister is undergoing therapy now. He provided them with some financial support, hoping they could live well. He took over the company I'd managed, and he's doing exceptionally well. He helped fulfill my dream. He said he visited my parents too. He got along well with them. He even became their godson. Every week, he visits Liu Yan's grave. He mentioned he always wanted siblings. When he found out he had a younger brother, he was truly happy and excited. He told me he even dreamt of Liu Yan, remembering the times I'd spent with him. Finally, he understood why I loved Liu Yan. He said he thought his brother had good taste, just like him. He's not fixated on my love, but he just wants to watch over me for as long as he lives. I lay there for 2 years. Over those 2 years, I witnessed Gu Shi grow better and better. He became independent, strong, responsible. Gu Shi became uniquely, truly himself. It's time for me to leave. He doesn't need me anymore. I'm going to see Liu Yan. That day was my birthday. Gu Shi brought me gentian flowers. He sipped his drink, talking to me. That night, he fell asleep drowsily beside my bed, and I left. I entered his dream. I said goodbye to him in person. Gu Shi woke up abruptly. Realizing he could no longer hear my breathing, he cried out my name, his voice breaking with sorrow. "Gu Shi, you're amazing. In the next life, I'll be sure to thank you properly." The end.